Is the Taekook connection written in the stars, or perhaps it's written in their palms. In this palmistry exclusive, I'm going to be diving deep into the hands of Taehyung and Jungkook from BTS to get a greater understanding of their spiritual, emotional, and energetic compatibility. Let's discover if they are in fact twin flames or just kindred spirits. Now, this is not just shipping. This is a deep dive. This is some serious hand analysis. Thank you very much for joining me, and do not forget to subscribe. I've already created several videos around every member of BTS. So first of all, let's look at V. So having already read V's hands, I've already discovered quite a bit about him. He's got a lot of water in his hands. His hands are very psychic, and they're quite analytical as well. This makes him exceptionally emotionally intelligent, emotionally aware. He's very self-aware as well. His Jupiter finger is, in fact, very long, especially when considering all of the other members of BTS. He really knows himself. He's got a good understanding of himself. Now, why is it relevant that V, being psychic, has what relevance does that have towards compatibility, towards JK? Well, Taehyung is incredibly watery in terms of his elements. So we have a very long palm and very long fingers. They taper to a fine and gentle point, and these are very characteristics of psychic hands. He has a great deal about him which represents clairsentience. In other words, the ability to pick up on other people's feelings. He feels what other people feel, and it's almost like sort of telepathy, but an emotional kind of telepathy. Why is that relevant? Well, when we look at JK's hands here, check out his Jupiter finger. It's very short indeed. So his idea of himself is reduced. He's extremely hard on himself, and he's not as self-aware. There's a tremendous amount of intensity and passion, an incredible capacity for feeling. Also, the Mercury finger is somewhat low set. It's long, but it's low set. Thankfully, the length levens some of the insecurity that he feels and the inability to not only understand his emotions, but to articulate them. So coming back to V, his ability to pick up on other people's feelings as well as understand them enables someone like JK to understand his own feelings and express them, bring him out of himself. And so, in this way, JK is really benefited by V's presence, just by having him around. Part of the reason for this, and this is kind of classic in Earth hands. Now, JK is not a classical Earth hand. If you've watched my palm reading for him, you'll know that I've, case closed, described him as a fire hand. And that's true. His palm is long and his fingers are short. But most people, and this is just about everyone, have more than one element to their hands. JK has absolutely fire predominantly, but he also has a bit of earth as well. Most people have more than one element to their hands, which is why I don't really subscribe all that much meaning to classifying the hands in just 4 types. It's not enough for me, which is why I use a system of 12. You can check out that on my website blog, somewhere up here, if I can be bothered to put that link in. So what does it mean to be predominantly fire and secondary earth in element? Well, yes, he is inspirational. He's quick in movement. He's very social. He is influential. He's kind of destructive in relationships and friendships, but in a fairly necessary way. He's probably likely going to say the things that need to be said, which no one else will. Also, fire hands just dazzle us, Like I say, they are inspirational, but they are a spectacle. There's something to behold when they do what they do best. Now, the earth element in JK is going to be much more grounded, much more physical, and that's what I see in his hands. Although it is rectangular, it is somewhat squarish. It's very chunky. It's not all that far off being a square, and the fingers are very chunky as well. There aren't, majorly speaking, the lines themselves present as just those 3 lines. I mean, yes, there is more going on there. You have to really look in between the lines, but predominantly, the major palmar lines stand out as just the heart, head, and lifelines, and this is very characteristic of Earth hand. So he's got some Earth hand traits here as well. And this means that the more worldly, practical, physical aspects about him are very strong, sturdy, secure, grounded. He's quite material in this way. And this structure, this routine, this order, this is something that water hands need. They drive for this because they lack it in their own lives. And this is partly because they're disconnected, because they're in constant movement and they're so rooted and attached to their emotions. And as I've mentioned, V has water in his hand in abundance. He's also somewhat of an analytical hand as well, which means there's a little bit of air. This means that he's highly introspective and, in fact, makes something of an exceptional counselor. And, on an emotional level, he's extremely able to understand people. His emotional capacity is huge. His emotional understanding and awareness, emotional intelligence. And he's so much more than all of these things I'm mentioning. But in terms of these two and their compatibility, this is huge. Now, I'm not going to speak for sexuality in this reading. I think that kind of oversteps a mark, and there are certain signs in the hands where I can see, bisexuality or homosexuality. There's not really been enough study in this, and I just don't see the relevance, and also I don't really feel all that comfortable in exposing these kinds of secrets in the hands of celebrities. It's not for me to say. It's not my message to speak. And also, I just don't see it as being all that relevant. I'm going to speak for the compatibility here, and you can make of it what you will. So, what does it mean when I say, predominantly water, predominantly fire? And then the secondary elements here, neither of these, predominantly water doesn't get on all that well with fire, air doesn't get all that on that well with earth. But when you have the combination which these two do in their hands, in the way in which they do, there's enough here to provide compatibility, certainly for a lifelong friendship. And the basis of all strong, long lasting, mutual, and healthy, loving relationships begin with friendships. So, water absolutely is compatible with earth, and fire absolutely is compatible with air. But here's the thing, and this is partly why I don't love the whole four elemental system, that four uh, you know, classification method for system of four, because too much water in a hand will flood the earth. Too much earth is not adaptable and flexible enough for water's needs. Too much air in a hand, and fire gets blown out. Too much fire, and all of the oxygen gets sucked out of air. So there has to be some sort of equilibrium. And this is why it works quite well when we see it like this. There is enough water in these hands to soak JK's earth, to provide him with the water here that he needs to grow, to understand, to heal. In fact, that's what water does after all. And in turn, Earth here does a similar thing in terms of growth. It allows V's growth in a different way, though, in a much more practical way, providing V with those foundations that he lacks because he's such a dreamer. There's practical, material, worldly aspects about his life which he doesn't have quite such a handle on because he's so uh, drawn and connected and attached to the spiritual, to the emotional, to his imagination. V is tremendously um, attached to the water in his life and the moon. So that little bit of air here is just what JK needs. It's not too much to blow his fire out. And that little bit of earth here is just what V needs to help provide him with that perspective which he lacks. They both have a perspective that the other doesn't in a way that complements each other. Notice how V's thumb is on the long side. It certainly reaches halfway of the third phalanx of the Jupiter finger. This is the sign of a long thumb. Now, JK's thumb is not quite as long, so he's not quite as deep thinking. He's not quite as introspective. And so again, Where JK has a much more kind of physical, vibrant efficiency about him to get the um, practical environmental tasks done. This is an aspect that V kind of lacks because he's just so caught up in his own thoughts and emotions. At the same time, V has that introspection, that inner insight which JK lacks in order to help each other grow here. They really have the best of both worlds that provide each other with um, really some powerful and necessary tools. And certainly there's all the hallmarks here of a very strong and powerful, at least symbiotic relationship, but absolutely a strong friendship on an energetic level. JK is kind of primal, and he's kind of I don't really know how else to put it. But there's certainly a primal energy around him. JK is very much say what you see, and feel what you feel, and don't make excuses, don't apologize, live your life. And he does it with such vibrancy and efficiency and just full force physical effort. You can see that by the combination of all of his major Palmer lines. The headline here shows someone who's just super straight talking, straight thinking, to the point, blunt, and makes no apologies about what he says and how he goes about these things. The Heartline, that's a lot more complicated. And again, there's an inability to really compartmentalize thought from feeling here. And this is partly going to provide him with some serious kind of emotional struggles if these aren't understood. And again, this is really why V will and can help with this. Having someone just like V around is exactly what JK needs. And the way in which he lives his life is actually very, he's just out there. He's super, um, the way in which he lives his life environmentally is quite imaginative. It's hard to explain this, but he is bold. He's courageous. He's on the move. He's always traveling. But there's quite a physical reason for this. He wants the physical experience out of life, and that's why he's gonna travel. He really enjoys and gains a great sense of satisfaction from dance, from feeling, from experiencing, from changing his surroundings, and as a result, being, so primal, there is something of a self-destructive nature about him, being especially that we've got so much fire in him as well. So having someone around him that's a lot more sensitive, that's a lot more aware and understanding of the more complex aspects about human nature around, that's really going to support JK. And in turn, and this is the flip side here, V, look at his lifeline and just how kind of the trajectory is different because it narrows the Venus mount. There's less constitution, less vitality, actually not as strong as an immune system, and a greater predisposition towards kind of retracting and kind of just being a bit of a hermit and just actually being all right with just having a couple of friends rather than a massive social circle. He's not as social. I mean, it's a difficult one because this is internally. The right hand would reveal the external lifestyle. Inherently speaking, inwardly, he's quite happy in his own company, whereas JK might not be so much. It's kind of difficult to compare a left and a right hand, but these are the clearest images I have. I'm comparing V's internal world with JK's external world. And we can clearly see he steps outside of his comfort zone because the lifeline exceeds that of the left hand. But it's likely through his work and his comrades that he's able to or feels able to step outside and be supported in his environment because this hand shows a much more environmentally capable aspects and traits about him, whereas V shows a much more internally capable individual. They're yin and yang. They really are. I can't stress that enough. But in a way that is balanced enough for both to get a good amount from each other in a very healthy way. V's hesitance to step outside into the unknown and explore and be brave, be courageous, and take those occasional risks is encouraged by someone like JK in a way that is quite healthy and fun and safe because they both kind of negate each other's negative aspects. And that really bodes well for something more than a friendship. On an emotional level, both are very emotional people. They feel very strongly, but they feel in different ways. As I've already mentioned, JK finds it very difficult to separate thought from a feeling. When he does something, he does it out of, um, a decision is not just a decision. There's a feeling behind it as well. There's passion behind it. There's intensity. There is a real drive. Everything that he does is with the entirety of his being. He's super intense in this way. He's incredibly inspiring. And V is also an extremely inspirational person, but in a much more conceptual and artistic way. He's got a great deal more vision and he's super sensitive in being able to pick up on information that of which most cannot through the five senses. And whilst JK has a massive, realm of emotionality, because he's a fire hand, because he's quite primal as well, and quite physical, there is something of an inability to control his own emotions at times, and that's probably likely, again, that's shown in his short Jupiter figure as well, that it beats himself up, that at times there's a release needed here, and without truly understanding himself and his feelings and being able to articulate and having an avenue, a channel for expressing these complex feelings, which he certainly has, he's going to suffer, he's going to struggle. So having uh, actually a natural and practically psychic counselor around, and I don't like to define V in that way because he's just, as I say, so much more than that. JK is really going to benefit from V's inherent kind of aptitude and aptitude. He's got all the hallmarks of um, a healer, a guidance counselor, a super compassionate individual that truly understands and also wants to help, wants to heal, and it's just coming from the right place. So JK really benefits from having V around, sure, but how does V benefit from JK's emotionality? Well, that's complicated. First of all, V learns a great deal from JK. There's no one else around like JK when it comes to his intensity and his passion, his nature, his emotionality, and just how much he feels and how he channels this. Because when he does it properly, when he does it healthily through a form of expression, there's no greater spectacle, shall we say. And whilst, he learns from him, how does he benefit? Well, when it's good, it's amazing. When it's bad, it's probably quite destructive. But again, coming back to those elements, there's enough there in balance for each other to understand each other to a degree where I don't feel there's enough of a there isn't. I think in JK's life, there's probably a lot of people around him where they misunderstand him. He isn't able to put something into words, a communication issue crops up. When it comes to these two, that doesn't happen because with V, he's so able and willing to so understanding. That's going to really vindicate and validate JK. In turn, V gets an emotional experience in understanding, in gaining that perspective. So on a physical, environmental level, V is really brought out of his shell and provided, um, a healthy kind of environment, a safe hand, a safe company to be around when trying out those things, when exploring, experiencing new things. He's with a person that makes him feel safe and that is physically able to withstand and protect, you know? Emotionally, internally, JK is in turn supported in a very kind of likewise manner. He is able to explore internally with safety, with a helping hand, with guidance and understanding. So the two, they really complement each other in this way. In terms of spirituality, that's a little bit more difficult to understand. There really isn't all that much that these two can't face as a duo, that they can't overcome as a challenge when they are together in the thick of it. There really isn't, and I genuinely mean that. You know, notice how V's headline it veers sharply into Luna. He's kind of depressive at times. You know, has that kind of propensity towards unrealistic, dark, imaginative, unrealistic thoughts at times. JK flies out of the woodwork with a much more direct approach and balances out V in this way. You know, in everything I see, there's balance here. V's ability to be highly sensitive and understanding balances out JK's, again, direct emotional response. And the way in which they live their lives, you know, which I've already mentioned. So where, you know, somewhere like JK, he might be super direct with his response. When these two are kind of met with the need for tact and diplomacy, that's where V will step in and take over with a flexible, creative, adaptive mental approach. Where JK lacks this diplomacy skill, he's highly persuasive, but he lacks a little bit of diplomacy. That's where V steps in. Notice how the second phalanx of the thumb is a little bit wasted as well. So he's a lot more willing to be um, flexible in terms of his ideas. He's a lot more willing to be the sort of devil's advocate and say, okay, well, let's try out your thing for a bit then. I'm going to hold on to mine. I'm not going to let it go, but let's try out your idea. Whereas JK is a lot less willing. You know, he's a lot more sort of like, well, no, it's my way or the highway. But he is very much able to, on an emotional level, kind of present opportunities and explain things, express things in a way that JK can understand. Not many people can get through to JK in the same way that someone like V can, and vice versa. There really is um, a tremendous compatibility in terms of friendship, at the very least, on a very, very strong level between these two. So, are they lovers? I'm going to leave that for you to decide because it takes two to tango. And again, I'm not going to be revealing my own thoughts and feelings about sexuality of high profile figures on my channel. What I will say is, though, that they complement each other in ways that are really quite profound and unusual. It's unusual to find this kind of compatibility between two people. Certainly, every relationship, friendship or otherwise, has its problems. No two people in the world together are perfect. And I suppose that's because there's no real such thing as perfect. If you would like a palm reading for yourself, please do visit my website, piscespalmist.com, and book from there. Or if you would like me to read the hands of another star, or a K-pop singer, or whoever, please do let me know in the comments. Let me know what your thoughts are on this compatibility reading as well. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you all so much for watching. Please do like, please do subscribe, and I shall see you on the next one.